Alyssa Bustamante was 15 years old when she took the life of her 9-year-old neighbor in October 2009. She lived in St. Martins, Missouri, a small town where everyone knew each other. Alyssa had a troubled past. She dealt with depression and had been in and out of mental health treatment. She cut herself. She took pills. She had attempted to take her own life multiple times. Her mother was in prison. Her father had walked out on the family. Alyssa lived with her grandparents who tried their best to help her. But nothing prepared anyone for what she would do on October 21, 2009. Alyssa had been planning this for weeks. She dug 2 graves in the woods near her house days before the incident. She posted on her social media that one of her hobbies was ending people's lives. She wanted to know what it felt like. She was curious. She wanted the thrill. She told friends she wondered what it would be like to cause someone's death. On that evening, Alyssa told her younger sister to bring Elizabeth Alton over to play. Elizabeth was just 9 years old. She lived 4 houses down from Alyssa. She was heading home from a friend's house when Alyssa's sister found her. Elizabeth promised her mother she would be home for dinner. She never made it. Alyssa sent her little sister away and lured Elizabeth into the woods. What happened next was brutal. Alyssa strangled Elizabeth first. Then she took out a weapon and slit her throat. That wasn't enough. She stabbed Elizabeth multiple times in the chest. She dragged the body to one of the graves she had dug earlier. She covered it with leaves and dirt. Then Alyssa went home. She cleaned herself up. She washed the blood off her hands. She changed her clothes. She went to church with her family that same night like nothing happened. She sat in the pew and sang hymns. Elizabeth's mother called the authorities when her daughter didn't come home. Search teams looked everywhere. Alyssa even joined the search party. She helped look for the girl she had just taken from this world. She walked through the woods with neighbors calling Elizabeth's name. The next day, investigators questioned Alyssa. They found her diary. What they read inside was chilling. Alyssa had written an entry the night of October 21st. She admitted she had just caused someone's death. She described how she strangled them, slit their throat, and stabbed them. Then she wrote something that shocked everyone. She said it was an amazing experience. She said she enjoyed it. She wrote that she wanted to do it again someday. Alyssa confessed after authorities read her diary. She told them where the body was. She showed no real emotion during questioning. She was calm. She was collected. The trial began and Alyssa faced first-degree charges. But in January 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree charges and armed offense. She was 18 by then. In February 2012, the judge sentenced her to life in prison with the possibility of parole plus 30 years for the armed offense. Mental health professionals said Alyssa had major depression and borderline personality disorder. But that didn't excuse what she did. The judge said her actions were cold and calculated. Alyssa was denied parole in July 2024. Her next hearing is in 2029. Even if she gets parole from her life sentence, she still has to serve the 30-year sentence. She caused death for no reason except to feel something. Elizabeth Alton never got to grow up. She never got to go to high school or have her first dance. She never got to graduate or have a family. She was 9 years old. Her mother still visits the spot where her daughter's body was found. Alyssa took all of that away because she was curious. Natasha Cornett was 18 years old when she led a group of teenagers to take the lives of 3 members of a family on April 6, 1997. She lived in Pickville, Kentucky. Natasha had a terrible childhood. She was mistreated by family members from a young age. She started using drugs and alcohol when she was 13. She used heroin, cocaine, and ecstasy. She cut herself. She had been arrested twice before this incident. Once for forgery when she was 14, once for attacking her own mother. Natasha became the leader of a group of troubled teenagers. They all wore black clothes. They all claimed to worship Satan. They all wanted to escape their lives in Pickville. They wanted to go to New Orleans for Mardi Gras. They wanted freedom. They wanted to start over somewhere new. On April 5, 1997, Natasha and 5 other teenagers left Pickville. There was Edward Dean Mullins, who was 19, Joseph Lance Risner, who was 20, Crystal Sturgill, who was 18, Curran Howell, who was 17, and Jason Bryant, who was only 14. They drove in a beat-up car that barely ran. They partied at a motel the night before and destroyed the room. They left town before authorities could find them. They drove south on Interstate 81 through Tennessee. They needed money. They needed a better car. They decided to rob someone at a rest stop. The Lillelid family stopped at a rest area near Baileyton, Tennessee that evening. Vidar Lillelid was 34 years old. His wife Delphina was 28. They had 2 children, 6-year-old Tabitha and 2-year-old Peter. They were driving home to Knoxville after attending a religious conference in Johnson City. They were good people. They were a happy family. Natasha and her group approached them in the parking lot. Natasha had a firearm. The others had weapons too. They told the family they needed help with their car. Vidar was kind. He wanted to help. He had no idea what was about to happen. The teenagers forced the family into their van at gunpoint. They made Vidar drive to a deserted road in the woods. They drove for miles. They stopped on a dark rural road. Natasha ordered everyone out of the van. The family begged for their lives. Vidar asked them to let his children go. Delphina held her babies tight. Then the teenagers started firing. They discharged their firearms over and over. Vidar was shot multiple times. Delphina was shot in the head and chest. 6-year-old Tabitha was shot in the head. Even 2-year-old Peter was shot twice, once behind his ear, once in his back. The teenagers left them all for deceased on the side of the road. They took the van and drove away. A passing driver found the family the next morning. Vidar, Delphina and Tabitha had all passed away, but little Peter was still breathing. He was rushed to the hospital. He had been shot twice in the head and survived the entire night in the cold. He was in critical condition, but he lived. He was the only survivor. Meanwhile, Natasha and her group were arrested in Arizona 2 days later. They were driving the stolen van. They confessed to everything. The trial began in Greenville, Tennessee. Natasha was 19 by then. On March 13, 1998, she pleaded guilty to all charges to avoid the death penalty. She was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The other teenagers received similar sentences. Jason Bryant, who was only 14 at the time, also got life in prison. Mental health experts said Natasha had severe psychological problems from years of mistreatment. But that didn't excuse what she did. Natasha is still in prison today. She will never get out. Peter Lillelid survived but lost his entire family. He was adopted and grew up without his parents or sister. He has scars all over his body. He has nightmares. The Lillelid family stopped to rest on their way home. They never made it. 3 people passed away and a 2-year-old was left alone in the world because 6 teenagers wanted money for a road trip. Rachel Shoaf was 16 years old, and Shelia Eddy was 16, when they took the life of their best friend on July 6, 2012. All 3 girls lived in Star City, West Virginia near Morgantown. Skylar Nees was also 16. The 3 of them had been best friends since middle school. They did everything together. They went to parties together. They posted photos on social media together. They called themselves inseparable, but Rachel and Shelia had a secret. They were in a romantic relationship with each other. They were afraid Skylar would tell people. They were afraid of being exposed, so they decided to take her life. Rachel and Shelia planned it for weeks. They talked about how they would do it. They picked a location. They decided to use weapons because firearms would be too loud. They practiced what they would say to get Skylar to come with them. On the night of July 5, 2012, Shelia drove to Skelar's apartment around midnight. Skelar snuck out her bedroom window like she had done many times before. Her parents were asleep. Security cameras caught Skelar climbing into Shelia's car. Rachel was already in the back seat. Skelar had no idea this would be the last time she would see her home. The girls drove across the state line into Greene County, Pennsylvania. They told Skelar they were going to smoke marijuana in the woods. Skelar trusted them completely. They drove down a dark rural road and parked. They walked into the woods together. They talked and laughed. Skelar thought this was just another normal night with her best friends. Then Rachel and Shelia positioned themselves behind Skelar. They counted to 3 out loud. On 3 they both attacked. Rachel and Shelia stabbed Skelar over and over. Skelar screamed. She tried to run. She begged them to stop. She asked why they were doing this. Rachel tackled her and kept stabbing. Shelia followed and kept stabbing. They stabbed her more than 50 times. They stabbed her in the neck, chest, and stomach. Skelar fought for her life, but she didn't stand a chance against both of them. When Skelar stopped moving, Rachel and Shelia covered her body with branches and leaves. They drove back to West Virginia. They cleaned the blood out of the car. They threw away their bloody clothes. They went home and went to sleep. The next day, Skelar's parents reported her missing. Rachel and Shelia pretended to help. They posted missing person flyers on social media. They joined search parties. They cried on camera. They hugged Skelar's parents. They acted like they were devastated. For 6 months, they kept up the lie. Authorities suspected them from the beginning, but had no proof. Finally, in December 2012, Rachel broke down. She couldn't handle the guilt anymore. She confessed everything to authorities. She told them where the body was. On January 16, 2013, police found Skelar's remains exactly where Rachel said they would be. Rachel and Shelia were arrested. When police asked Rachel why they did it, she gave a chilling answer. She said they just didn't like her anymore. Rachel pleaded guilty to second-degree offense on May 1, 2013. On February 26, 2014, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. Shelia pleaded guilty to first-degree offense on January 24, 2014. She was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Rachel has been denied parole twice. Her next hearing is in 2028. Shelia's first parole hearing is scheduled for May 2028. Both girls are still behind bars at Lakin Correctional Center in West Virginia. Skelar Nees climbed out her bedroom window to hang out with her 2 best friends. She never came back. She was stabbed more than 50 times because 2 teenagers were afraid she might tell their secret. Skelar's parents still visit the spot where her body was found. They placed a bench there in her memory. The case led to Skelar's law in West Virginia, which requires authorities to issue Amber Alerts for all missing children, not just those believed to be abducted. Brenda Spencer was 16 years old when she opened fire on a school across the street from her house on January 29, 1979. She lived in San Diego, California with her father in a small house directly across from Grover Cleveland Elementary School. Brenda had a troubled childhood. Her parents divorced when she was young. Her mother left and never came back. She had issues with drugs and alcohol. She started drinking when she was 13. She got into trouble at school. She skipped classes. She fought with other students. She was lonely and angry. She had no real friends. She spent most of her time alone in her room. For Christmas 1978, her father gave her a rifle and 500 rounds of ammunition. When asked why he gave his troubled teenage daughter such a gift, he said he thought she would use it on herself. He wanted her to have that option. On the morning of January 29, 1979, children gathered outside Grover Cleveland Elementary School, waiting for the gates to open. It was a normal Monday morning. Kids were laughing and playing. Principal Burton Ragg was getting ready to unlock the gates at 8:30. Parents were dropping off their kids. The sun was shining. Then Brenda opened her bedroom window. She aimed the rifle at the school playground. She started firing. She fired 36 rounds in 20 minutes. Children screamed and ran for cover. Some fell to the ground. Blood was everywhere. Parents grabbed their children and ran. Teachers tried to shield students with their own bodies. Principal Burton Ragg ran outside to help the children who were down. He was a hero. He didn't think about his own safety. Brenda aimed and fired at him. Ragg was hit multiple times and fell to the ground. He was 53 years old. He had worked at that school for years. He loved those children. Custodian Mike Sachar saw what happened and ran to help Ragg. He tried to drag him to safety. Brenda fired again. Sachar went down next to Ragg. He was 56 years old. He had a family. He had grandchildren. Both men passed away at the scene. 8 students were injured. A 9-year-old girl was hit in the back. An 8-year-old boy was hit in the leg. A police officer responding to the scene was also hit. Brenda kept firing at anything that moved. She shot at the police officers who tried to get close. She reloaded and kept going. She seemed to enjoy it. Parents and teachers dragged children to safety. While Brenda watched from her window, police surrounded her house. They tried to talk to her through a megaphone. The standoff lasted 6 hours. Officers couldn't get close without being fired at. A reporter from the San Diego Evening Tribune called Brenda's house during the incident. She answered the phone. The reporter asked why she did it. Brenda gave an answer that shocked everyone. She said she didn't like Mondays. She said this livens up the day. She said she wanted to cheer things up. Her words were cold. She showed no emotion. She sounded bored. She laughed. She finally surrendered in the afternoon. Police arrested her without further incident. She came out with her hands up. She was smiling. Brenda was charged as an adult. She pleaded guilty to 2 counts of first-degree offense and assault with a firearm. On April 4, 1980, one day after her 18th birthday, the judge sentenced her to 25 years to life in prison. Brenda is considered the first modern school offender in the United States. She set a pattern that others would follow. Her case changed how people thought about school safety. Metal detectors started appearing in schools. Lockdown drills became common. Brenda has been denied parole 7 times. Her most recent denial was in February 2025. She is now 62 years old and still behind bars. She later claimed she was under the influence of drugs and alcohol that morning. She said her father mistreated her. She said he did terrible things to her. But those explanations don't bring back Burton Ragg or Mike Sachar. They don't heal the 8 children who were injured. They don't erase the terror of that Monday morning. 2 men died trying to protect children. Brenda took their lives because she didn't like Mondays. Cindy Collier was 15 years old and Shirley Wolfe was 14 when they met for the first time on June 14, 1983. They met in a juvenile detention center in Auburn, California. Both girls had troubled backgrounds. Shirley had suffered terrible mistreatment at home from a young age. Her father was cruel and violent. Cindy had her own problems with the law. The 2 girls knew each other for less than 8 hours before they decided to do something unthinkable. They wanted to take someone's life just to see what it felt like. They wanted to steal a car and run away. They picked someone they thought would be easy to overpower. That same day, June 14, 1983, they escaped from the detention center. They walked through the neighborhood knocking on doors. They told people they needed to use a phone. Most people turned them away, but 85-year-old Anne Brackett opened her door. She was kind. She trusted them. She let them inside her home in Auburn. Anne sat at her dining room table with the 2 girls. She made them comfortable. She had no idea what they were planning. Cindy went to the kitchen. She grabbed a butcher weapon and a paring weapon from Anna's own drawers. She came back to the dining room. She handed the butcher weapon to Shirley and said one word. "Now." Shirley started stabbing Anna immediately. Anna screamed. She begged them to stop. She fought back as much as she could. But she was 85 years old. She didn't stand a chance. Shirley stabbed her 28 times. Even after Anna was deceased, they stabbed her one more time. Blood was everywhere. The girls left Anna's body on the floor. They didn't steal the car. They didn't take anything valuable from the house. Instead, they went back to Cindy's home in a burn and went to sleep like nothing happened. Shirley wrote in her journal that night. She wrote that she and Cindy ran away and caused an old lady's death. Then she wrote something disturbing. She said it was lots of fun. Authorities found the girls that same night sleeping at Cindy's house. They arrested them immediately. Both girls confessed on tape. They showed no remorse. They talked about the incident like it was a game. The trial started in July 1983. Both girls were tried in juvenile court because of their ages. On July 29, 1983, Judge J. Richard Cousins found both girls guilty of first-degree offense. The verdict took only 15 minutes. Cindy was sentenced to the California Youth Authority until she turned 27. Shirley's lawyers argued she was legally insane because of the mistreatment she suffered. But the jury didn't buy it. She received the same sentence. Both girls showed little emotion when the verdict was read. Anna Brackett was a kind woman who opened her door to help two young girls. She paid for that kindness with her life. The girls took her life for no real reason. They wanted to feel something. They wanted excitement. Anna never got to see another day because two teenagers decided her life meant nothing. Toni Jo Henry was 24 years old when she took the life of a stranger on February 14, 1940. She was born Annie Beatrice McQuiston in Shreveport, Louisiana in 1916. Her mother passed away from tuberculosis when Toni Jo was just 6 years old. Her father remarried and Toni Jo hated her stepmother. She begged her aunt to take her away. At 13, she got a job in a macaroni factory but was fired when the manager found out her mother died of tuberculosis. Her father beat her when she came home. Toni Jo ran away at 15. She ended up working in houses where men paid for companionship. She became addicted to drugs by 16. She drank heavily. She had a hard life. Then in 1939 she met called Cowboy Henry. He was a handsome Texas outlaw. She fell in love with him immediately. They got married after knowing each other for only a few weeks. But Cald got into trouble. In January 1940 he was in a bar fight in Texas. He caused the death of a former San Antonio police officer. He was arrested and convicted. The judge sentenced him to 50 years in Huntsville prison in Texas. Toni Jo was devastated. She couldn't imagine life without her husband. She decided she would break him out of prison no matter what it took. She came up with a plan. She would rob a bank in Game Den, Arkansas. She would use the money to bribe prison guards and hire help. She needed someone to help her. She met Harold Archie Burks. He agreed to help her rob the bank. On February 14, 1940, Valentine's Day, Toni Jo and Archie were hitchhiking from Lake Charles, Louisiana toward Arkansas. They were looking for a car to steal. Joseph Calloway was driving a Ford Coupe. He was delivering to a friend. He was a good man. He was kind. He saw two people on the side of the road and stopped to help. He offered them a ride. Joseph had no idea what was about to happen. Toni Jo and Archie got in the car. They drove for miles. Joseph made friendly conversation. He was just trying to be nice. Then Toni Jo pulled out a firearm. She told Joseph to pull over on a deserted dirt road. Toni Jo ordered Joseph out of the car. She told him to take off his clothes. Joseph begged for his life. He asked what he had done wrong. He said he had a family. Archie took his clothes. Toni Jo told Joseph to kneel down. She told him to say his prayers. Joseph got on his knees. He prayed out loud. Then Toni Jo aimed the firearm at his head and discharged it once. Joseph fell to the ground. He passed away instantly. He was deceased because he stopped to help two strangers. Toni Jo and Archie took the car and drove to Condon, Arkansas. But Archie got scared. He saw how far Toni Jo was willing to go. He abandoned her and took the car. Toni Jo took a bus back to Shreveport. Authorities found Joseph's body the next day. They tracked down Toni Jo within days. She confessed immediately. She handed over the weapon. She showed no remorse. Her trial began in March 1940. She tried to blame Archie. She said he discharged the firearm. The jury didn't believe her. After 6 hours of deliberation on March 29, 1940, she was found guilty of first-degree offense. The judge sentenced her to death by hanging. Toni Jo showed no emotion when the verdict was read. She appealed twice. Both times she got new trials because of legal errors. Both times she was convicted again. On November 28, 1942, Toni Jo was executed in the electric chair at the Calcasieu Parish Courthouse in Lake Charles, Louisiana. She was 26 years old. She became the first and only woman ever executed in Louisiana's electric chair. Joseph Calloway stopped to give two strangers a ride on Valentine's Day. He paid for that kindness with his life. Toni Jo took everything from him because she loved a man who was in prison. Caril Ann Fugate was 14 years old when she became part of one of America's most infamous incidents in 1958. She lived in Lincoln, Nebraska with her mother Velda Bartlett, her stepfather Marion Bartlett, and her 2-year-old half-sister Betty Jean. Caril was dating Charles Starkweather, a 19-year-old with a troubled past and a violent temper. He had dropped out of school. He had a bad attitude. He thought the world owed him something. What happened over 8 days in January 1958, it would shock the entire nation and become one of the most debated cases in American history. On January 21, 1958, Charles went to Caril's house. Her parents told him to stay away from their daughter. They didn't like him. They didn't trust him. What happened next was brutal. Charles shot Velda in the face with his firearm. He shot Marion multiple times. Then he took little Betty Jean and beat her to death with the butt of his weapon. He strangled her with a rope to make sure she was deceased. He hid the bodies in the outhouse and chicken coop behind the house. Caril came home from school that day. What she knew and when she knew it remains one of the biggest questions in this case. For the next 6 days, Caril stayed in that house with Charles while her family's bodies were hidden outside. They put a sign on the door that said everyone was sick with the flu. They turned away visitors. They made excuses. Caril's grandmother came by. Caril told her to leave. Other relatives stopped by. They were turned away too. On January 27th, relatives became suspicious and called authorities. They found the bodies. By then Caril and Charles were gone. They had started a spree that would leave 7 more individuals deceased across Nebraska and Wyoming. They went to an old family friend's farm. They took the life of a 70-year-old man. They drove to Bennett, Nebraska. They took the life of a 17-year-old boy named Robert Jensen and his 16-year-old girlfriend Carol King. They left their bodies in a storm cellar. Charles had forced them to go down there. He made them lie on the ground. Then he discharged his firearm multiple times. They went to a wealthy home in Lincoln and caused the death of a business owner, his wife, and their maid. They stabbed the maid to death. They discharged firearms at the couple. They took another life in Wyoming after forcing a traveling salesman off the road. They stole cars. They drove for days. A massive manhunt was underway. On January 29, 1958, authorities spotted them near Douglas, Wyoming. A high-speed chase began. Charles crashed the stolen car. He was shot in the leg during his arrest. Caril ran to the authorities and said she had been held against her will the entire time. She claimed Charles threatened to harm her if she tried to escape. She said she was a hostage. She cried. She seemed terrified. Charles told a different story. He said Charles helped him. He said she was with him willingly. He said she handed him ammunition. He said she watched while he caused people's deaths and never tried to stop him. The trials began in May 1958. Charles was convicted and sentenced to death. He was executed in the electric chair on June 25, 1959. He was 20 years old. Caril's trial started in October 1958. Her defense claimed she was terrified and held hostage. The prosecution said she had chances to escape but didn't take them. She could have run when they stopped for gas. She could have told the people who came to the door. On November 21, 1958, the jury found Caril guilty of first-degree offense. She became the youngest female in United States history to be convicted of first-degree offense. The judge sentenced her to life in prison. Caril served 17 years behind bars. She maintained her innocence every single day. She was paroled in 1976. She later got married and lived a quiet life in Michigan. She received a full pardon in 2020 when she was 82 years old. To this day, people debate whether she was a willing participant or a terrified teenager. 11 people passed away during those 8 days. The truth may never be fully known. Paula Cooper was 15 years old when she took the life of a 78-year-old Bible school teacher on May 14, 1985. Paula lived in Gary, Indiana. She had a terrible childhood. Her mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol. Paula was mistreated at home in the worst ways. She was stabbed by her own mother when she was just 12 years old. The weapon went into her chest. She almost died. Nobody helped her. Nobody protected her. Paula dropped out of school. She got into fights. She drank. She used drugs. She was angry at the world. She felt like nobody cared if she lived or died. On that spring afternoon in 1985, Paula and 3 other teenage girls decided to skip class. They wanted money. They needed a car. They came up with a plan to rob someone. They targeted elderly people because they thought it would be easy. The girls went door to door looking for an easy target. They knocked on Ruth Pelk's door. Ruth was a kind 78-year-old woman who taught Bible classes in her home to neighborhood children. She had been a teacher for years. She loved helping young people. When the girls told her they wanted to learn about the Bible, she believed them. She was happy to help. She let them inside without hesitation. She trusted them completely. Ruth sat down with the girls at her dining room table. She started talking to them about Scripture. She opened her Bible and showed them passages. She was kind and patient. Then Paula asked to use the bathroom. When she came back, everything changed. Paula's face looked different. Her eyes looked cold. Paula grabbed a butcher weapon from Ruth's kitchen. She told Ruth to give them money. Ruth said she only had $10. She apologized for not having more. Paula didn't care. She started stabbing Ruth. She stabbed her again and again. Ruth begged for her life. She asked them why they were doing this. She prayed out loud while Paula kept stabbing. She called out to God for help. Paula stabbed Ruth 33 times in the chest, stomach, back, and neck. The other girls held Ruth down while Paula did it. They took the $10 from her purse. They took Ruth's car keys from the counter. They covered Ruth's body with a sheet and left her dying on the floor. Then they drove away in her car like nothing happened. They went to a store and bought candy with Ruth's money. Authorities found Ruth's body later that day when family members came to check on her. The scene was horrific. Blood was everywhere. They arrested all 4 girls within days. Paula confessed immediately. She showed no emotion during questioning. She was calm. She didn't cry. The trial began and the case shocked the nation. Paula was charged with first-degree offense. On July 11, 1986, she was found guilty. The judge sentenced her to death by lethal injection. Paula was 16 years old at sentencing. She became the youngest person sentenced to death in the United States at that time. The world was outraged. People from over 20 countries sent letters begging for mercy. Even the Pope wrote a letter asking for her sentence to be changed. Human rights groups protested. They said executing a child was wrong. In July 1989, the Indiana Supreme Court changed her sentence to 60 years in prison. The court said Indiana law had been changed. No one under 16 could be executed anymore. Paula would have been the first and last person executed for an offense committed at 15. While in prison, Paula changed. She earned her high school degree. She got a college degree through correspondence courses. She trained dogs to help people with disabilities. She tutored other inmates. She wrote letters apologizing to Ruth's family. She seemed like a different person. Even Ruth's grandson forgave her. On June 17, 2013, Paula was released from Rockville Correctional Facility. She had served 27 years. She was 43 years old. Freedom was hard for Paula. She struggled to adjust. She had nightmares. She couldn't find work. She was depressed. On May 26, 2015, Paula took her own life. She was 45 years old. Ruth Pelk died because 4 teenagers wanted $10 and a car. Her grandson later became an advocate against the death penalty in her memory. Alyssa Bustamante was 15 years old when she took the life of her 9-year-old neighbor in October 2009. She lived in St. Martins, Missouri, a small town where everyone knew each other. Alyssa had a troubled past. She dealt with depression and had been in and out of mental health treatment. She cut herself. She took pills. She had attempted to take her own life multiple times. Her mother was in prison. Her father had walked out on the family. Alyssa lived with her grandparents who tried their best to help her. But nothing prepared anyone for what she would do on October 21, 2009. Alyssa had been planning this for weeks. She dug 2 graves in the woods near her house days before the incident. She posted on her social media that one of her hobbies was ending people's lives. She wanted to know what it felt like. She was curious. She wanted the thrill. She told friends she wondered what it would be like to cause someone's death. On that evening, Alyssa told her younger sister to bring Elizabeth Alton over to play. Elizabeth was just 9 years old. She lived 4 houses down from Alyssa. She was heading home from a friend's house when Alyssa's sister found her. Elizabeth promised her mother she would be home for dinner. She never made it. Alyssa sent her little sister away and lured Elizabeth into the woods. What happened next was brutal. Alyssa strangled Elizabeth first. Then she took out a weapon and slit her throat. That wasn't enough. She stabbed Elizabeth multiple times in the chest. She dragged the body to one of the graves she had dug earlier. She covered it with leaves and dirt. Then Alyssa went home. She cleaned herself up. She washed the blood off her hands. She changed her clothes. She went to church with her family that same night like nothing happened. She sat in the pew and sang hymns. Elizabeth's mother called the authorities when her daughter didn't come home. Search teams looked everywhere. Alyssa even joined the search party. She helped look for the girl she had just taken from this world. She walked through the woods with neighbors calling Elizabeth's name. The next day, investigators questioned Alyssa. They found her diary. What they read inside was chilling. Alyssa had written an entry the night of October 21st. She admitted she had just caused someone's death. She described how she strangled them, slit their throat, and stabbed them. Then she wrote something that shocked everyone. She said it was an amazing experience. She said she enjoyed it. She wrote that she wanted to do it again someday. Alyssa confessed after authorities read her diary. She told them where the body was. She showed no real emotion during questioning. She was calm. She was collected. The trial began and Alyssa faced first-degree charges. But in January 2012, she pleaded guilty to second-degree charges and armed offense. She was 18 by then. In February 2012, the judge sentenced her to life in prison, with the possibility of parole plus 30 years for the armed offense. Mental health professionals said Alyssa had major depression and borderline personality disorder. But that didn't excuse what she did. The judge said her actions were cold and calculated. Alyssa was denied parole in July 2024. Her next hearing is in 2029. Even if she gets parole from her life sentence, she still has to serve the 30-year sentence. She caused death for no reason, except to feel something. Elizabeth Alton never got to grow up. She never got to go to high school, or have her first dance. She never got to graduate or have a family. She was 9 years old. Her mother still visits the spot where her daughter's body was found. Alyssa took all of that away because she was curious.